As part of my health unit, I was teaching the kids about addiction, and I had them sitting in groups of 4-ish, and their job was to just talk about drugs. What did you learn in this unit? How have drugs affected you and your family? Like, what do you want to know? And they just had a chance to just kind of talk about and process what they had learned and any feelings that had brought up in their own personal lives. And as I'm walking, I'm just kind of wandering around to make sure that's what they're talking about, not the football game or what's for lunch or whatever. And I'm listening to the kids, and they're like, yeah, my dad's in jail because of drugs. Oh, my uncle's on the run because he's wanted for drug crimes. Yeah, I live with grandma because my parents are so hooked on drugs that they can't take care of us. And I was hearing so many of those stories, and I'm thinking, my mind was just blown. That many of my kids, that many of my students, their lives have been irrevocably affected by drug and alcohol addiction. And it was really sad to me. So at the end as I'm wrapping it up, I said to the kids, I said, okay, I defined addiction as being so hooked on something that it's affecting your life. Jail, money, abuse, like it's negatively affecting your life. And then I defined a loved one as like parent, sibling, aunt, uncle, close family friend, like someone who's really close to you. I said, raise your hand if someone really close to you is affected by addiction. And every single one of my kids raised their hands, and I was just like, what? I could not believe that many of my kids are struggling because of addiction. And I have since then done that. I now do that question at the end of that unit all the time. And never since then have every single kid raised their hand. I go anywhere from 30, 40% to 80%. I've never since then had 100% of my kids raise their hand. But it just amazed me that many of our children in our community, their lives are affected by addiction. And that is so sad to me. And so I got to wondering, so what causes addiction? Because when I grew up, addiction was I always thought that everyone started using drugs and alcohol because they got in with the rowdy crowd. You know, they were trying to be cool kids. I'm thinking of I'm going to be the cool kid who smokes cigarettes when I'm 12 because that's what the cool kids do. And I thought that's what started it. And so I asked the kids when I have this discussion, I said, for those of you who know how your loved one started, what started? And a couple of them were they got in with a rough crowd, but most of them, by and large, said it's because something bad happened in that person's life and they couldn't cope. A bad breakup, a death of a loved one, a lost job, an injury, something really emotionally hard happened, and they didn't know how to deal with it. They didn't have the coping skills that they needed. And so they turned to drugs and alcohol because they were so overwhelmed that they needed an escape. And they did it that one time, and it offered them the escape. And so what happens in their brain is our brains make these pathways. And in our brain, we have what's called the reward pathway. So when you do something great, I love chocolate chip cookies. So when I eat a chocolate chip cookie, I always tell the kids, my brain goes, woohoo, because I love a good chocolate chip cookie, right? So when they use the drug, their brain said, yes. And they got that break, that relief they needed from that hard thing. And so then the next time a hard thing happened, their brain's like, hey, remember the last time? We went over here to this thing and we felt better. And so if they try it again and try it, the first few times they're making that choice to try again. And then in your brain, you create what's called a well-worn path. A well-worn path. So if I'm out in the forest and I'm just trying to find a path, that takes some thought. But if I'm being chased by something in the forest, I'm taking the well-worn path. I don't have time to rush through the brambles, And so that happens in our brain when we create a path to something that feels safe or that makes us feel better. Our brain's okay, let's go this way. This is the easier way to go. Eventually, we start to build up a tolerance to that thing. Then we need more of it. And then we get to the point where our brain craves it, whether we're in a distressful time or not. Our brain's like, hey, let's go here because that makes us feel good. And so even when we're not needing an escape, our brain naturally just wants to go to that thing. And that's the way we've always understood addiction. And there is science that comes behind that. And so scientists have thought, well, it's just a matter of if you can, there's this happy thing that makes them happy. So then I always thought, like, let's get this other thing that makes me happy, and then I'll go that way and I'll get away from that bad thing. But what scientists, there's another scientist, his name was Bruce Alexander in the 70s. He heard the story of addiction, and many of us understand that there were experiments where they would put a rat in a cage by itself, and they would give the rat a bottle of water and a bottle of basically heroin water. And the rats had the choice between the two. And so the rats would start over time using the heroin water more and more and more, and many of the rats overdosed on the heroin. And so that's why people are like, oh, if you have a choice between two things, they're always going to go to the drug because they get so hooked on it. So this Bruce Alexander is like, okay, that makes sense, but there's something flawed in this experiment. Who lives alone, locked in a cage? We live in a society full of people. So what would happen if the rats had a society? And so he made what he called Rat Park. And Rat Park was a little rat society. And they had toys and balls and wheels to run on and tunnels to run through, and they had friends. And in Rat Park, he put a bottle of heroin water and a bottle of regular water. And some of the rats drank the heroin water sometimes, but not a single rat overdosed. Not a single rat got hooked on the heroin water. And so he's like, okay, so this kind of shows a difference between the other things. So what's the difference? And he came to the conclusion that the difference is in Rat Park, the rats had community. The rats weren't alone. If you lock me in a cage, for me, that's going to be terrible because I love people. I mean, if you look at prison, what do they do when you're really bad in jail? What do? They put you in solitary confinement. So when people feel all alone, whether they are or not, if they feel all alone, they're much more likely to go to the thing that gives them the relief, because being alone is awful. But if you're in a community and you've got good things, like fun things, whatever, where you feel supported, you feel like you're not alone, you're way less likely to turn to the bad thing. So when I think about people who are suffering from addiction, I think, like, did they feel alone? And this is what scientists are now saying, that a lot of people who turn to, and I'm not just talking about drugs and alcohol, it's any kind of addiction. Gambling, pornography, shopping, food, like some of us like way overeat, whatever it is, whatever the addiction is, if we feel like we can't cope, we'll go to that thing. And I know some of you are thinking like, Stephanie, I have a loved one who is addicted, and I've always been there for them. But I don't know about you, but sometimes you can be surrounded by people and feel completely alone. I have been in a room full of people who know me and care about me and felt alone. Because in our culture, you're told, suck it up, buttercup. In our culture, you're told, you're suffering from something, you got to figure it out. In our culture, we're told that showing weakness is like showing that you're hurting is weakness and you need to be strong. We are told you've got to figure things out on your own. People are told you're too messy, you're too much. And so people hear that message, whether they are told that by their loved ones or just hearing it from our society. And so when you come across something hard, you think, I don't want to tell people that I'm suffering from this. They're going to think I'm weak. I don't want to tell people I'm suffering from this. They're going to tell me that I'm too much. Or it's possible that it's the loved one in their lives that's causing the pain, and of course they can't go to that person because they're the one causing them the pain. And so even though they're surrounded by people that seem to care about them, or that do care about them, a lot of people aren't willing to admit that they're suffering because they don't want to be seen as weak or too much or extra or whatever. I had a student say to me years ago, I was like, she said, Miss Wolf, why is it socially acceptable to be physically hurt, but it's not socially acceptable to be emotionally hurt? She said, nobody would expect a person with a broken leg to suck it up, put on a happy face, and just walk on that broken leg. And she's so right. She was struggling emotionally. Her parents are splitting up. Her dad uses substances. And she was struggling. And she was told, basically, figure it out. You just got to put on a happy face. It'll be fine. And she's like, I'm not fine. But she wasn't getting the help she needed because people in our culture, and we're starting, I feel like as a culture, we're starting to head in a direction where we recognize that emotional pain is as challenging and hard as physical pain. But for a long time, like think about, especially gentlemen who are older, when you were a kid and you were hurting, you were told, don't cry, rub some dirt on it, get over it. And for a long time in our culture, people have been told, you're hurting, don't cry, rub some dirt on it, and get over it. But if you are hurting emotionally or mentally, that doesn't work. We need help to cope with this. People need to have some coping skills. And one, as a Christian, what I am very encouraged by is that God understands this. God doesn't want us to be the rat by himself in the cage, because God understands that that's bad. God knows that being alone is bad. In fact, he said it in the very beginning, in the Genesis story. So in the Christian narrative, we believe that God created the world. And he created the world, and he created animals and plants, and then he created man. And then the Genesis story is that first he created a man, just one. And God's looking at his man, and God has a relationship with this man. But God's looked at him and said, it's not good for man to be alone. So I'm going to make a helper for him. God himself knows that we shouldn't be alone, that we should never have to deal with things on our own, that it's bad to be alone. God knows that isolation creates a problem for us, that we are always going to need a helper. And so the good news is God says, I'll be your helper. Cast your cares on the Lord, and he will sustain you. He will never let the righteous be shaken. So first and foremost, God says, are you hurting? Come to me. God doesn't care if you're a hot mess. And you might be in a mess that you made. You may have created the mess you're in. You may have screwed up royally, and now you're in over your head. And God says, that's all right. I still want you to come. I want you to come and sit on. I always think I think of God as a good father. And when I was a little kid, if I made a mess, if I fell and hurt my leg, I would go crawl up on my daddy's lap, and he would kiss me and tell me it's going to be okay, and he would help me. Now, he might still let me, if I created a mess, he might make me clean up my mess. But he still loved me. And that's, we have a good God who says, you're in a mess, come to me. Even if you made the mess, come to me. You are never alone. I am always with you. Cast your cares on me, and I will help you. I will walk through it with you. I will give you the strength to get through it. I will surround you with the people and the things you need if you come to me. And so first and foremost, when we are facing something, we need to go to God, not other people. We need to go to God and not substances. We need to go to God and not Amazon. We need to go to God and not chocolate chip cookies or chips or whatever it is. We need to go to God instead of going to the TV and flicking it on and numbing our brain to escape whatever it is that we're facing. And then God says, just like he said, this is also going to him. Don't be anxious, but come to me in prayer and thanksgiving and present your requests. He's saying, come to me. You can tell me anything. You are never too much for God. You are never a burden to God. When you come to God and you say, God, I need help. He's never like, oh, here she comes again. It's that Paula. She's always coming to ask me for something. He never says that. He's never like, ugh. When you walk into the throne room to talk to him, he's never rolling his eyes. He's like, come here. I want to hear about it. When we love somebody, even when they're a mess, we are like, come here. I want to know about it. There's the other one. And then, just like Bruce Alexander found that Rat Park makes it so that the rats don't overdose, God says you need a partner. You need friends. You need a community. And so as a community, our job as a community of believers is to carry each other's burdens. If I see that Rob is down, if I know Rob's going through it, I'm not like, You know what we'll do is text me if you need something, and we'll just say that. And we're like, oh, I've done my duty. I've told him I'm here. What I need to do is see that Rob is down and like, hey, let's go out to dinner. Let's talk about it. Oh, I remember this is the time of year when you lost your mom, your dad, your whoever. Like, let's go get coffee. Oh, I see that you're going through a hard time. Can I show up and help? Can I help clean your house? Can I take your kids for a couple hours so you can get a break? We need to, instead of being like, oh, we need to actually show up and know our friends and know our family and see what they need and try to fill that need for them. And keep coming back, because you know what they're going to say, because in our culture, I'm fine. Oh, I'm fine, I got it. But we need to keep showing up. What can I do to help you? Hey, I just want to hang out with you. Hey, can I come over Tuesday and I'll help you clean your house? Because I know you're going through something right now. Let's go out to dinner. I'll pay. As Christians, we should be a people who are trying to see when someone is burdened and then help them carry that burden. And someday they're going to see that we're burdened and they're going to help carry our burden. That's the whole point of being in a community. That's the whole point of being in a family, is that we show up when the other person needs us. And so if you want to grow in your faith, if you want to represent Christ on earth, number one, when you're hurting, when you're down, come to the Lord first. Cast your burdens on him. He is never mad at you for coming to him. You are not wearing him out. If you come to him every single day, he's not like, ugh. He's like, yay, I love it when you come see me. You are never alone. And we have got to stop as a society thinking that we're on our own and that we've got to do it on our own. It is not weakness to ask for help. That is strength. It is strength to say, I am hurting and I need help. Can you come and watch my kid? You know what? I'm so overwhelmed I can't even cook. Do you think you could make that casserole that I love and bring it over for my family this week? We need to ask for help. We need to find for ourselves healthy coping mechanisms, and the first one is to go to God, and the second is to share our burdens with our friends and allow them, be vulnerable enough to allow them to come and help us. And then the next thing that we need to be doing is, I want you this week to really look at your close people. How are they doing? Check up on them. Ask them what you can do to help them, and they'll say, I'm fine, nothing. And be like, well, so instead say, what is it that's making things hardest for you most? And then when they say what that is, if it's something you can help with it. If they're like, I just can't catch up. Hey, how about I come over and I'll watch the kids so you can catch up. Or how about I'll come over and I'll clean your house so you and the kids can have some time to play. How about I take you out to dinner? Whatever. Ask them what it is that get to the point of what they really need and offer to come and carry their burdens, to give them a break because they're tired. We are supposed to be living in a rat park, not in isolation. And when we are truly living together, truly being vulnerable, truly helping each other, truly inviting God into it, we don't need the heroin water. And our loved ones won't need the heroin water if they truly feel like they're allowed to be vulnerable and share their stuff with us. And all of God's people said, Amen. If you have not said yes to Jesus, if you have not invited him in to your life and your heart, I would love for you to come down during this prayer, this song. I would love to show you how to do that.